First, I'd like to thank the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program for offering this invitation. It was completely unexpected, and so I made everything up yesterday to catch up, because that's how I usually do things. But our department, Literature and Language, has had a long relationship with this program, and so I thank you, Stacy, but I've got to thank Karen Shaka, who was a really fine colleague to so many of us. Judy Slagle, who was a chair of our department for I think about 14 years, offered a lot of support for this program and even served as an interim director after she retired. Chelsea was an interim director for a brief period, and Katrina Heil, who's another member of our faculty, served as interim director. But the person who helped me the most was Phyllis Thompson. And she was directing the program while I was a bachelor's student in the discipline. I got involved in it because I was working with Cindy Walker's lyrics, and I wanted to have the language to talk about what she was doing about presenting gender in her songs, because she was writing country music songs. Commercial country music's always been dominated by men, even though ironically, when you look at the Carter family, You've got Maybelle in the front there, and you've got the voice and the technique of early commercial country music coming from her, and the commercialization of it coming from AP. So let's just bear that in mind. And that happened. So much of this stuff has happened within 100 miles of here. It's just remarkable. We're in a good spot. But I was taking the courses, what we called women's studies then. I was seeing immediate application in my teaching, in my scholarship, and finding new elements in the material that I dealt with on a regular basis. So of course it made sense for me to just keep going as far as I could go. I was an Appalachian Studies minor. Again, you learn things in class and can apply them within just a couple of days in the courses that you teach. So I'm not exactly one to be called a poster child for continuing education, because I'm past the child stage, but I don't mind speaking up for you, and I'm happy to talk about this discipline when we have our open houses and everything, and saying, you need a minor, think about this. So it's usually, you need a minor, let's think about this. So I want to start off with something a little tacky. This is Terry Gibbs, and this was from the unfortunate country needed to make disco sounding songs era. So let's go here. This is Somebody's Knocking from 1980, and those of us who lived through the 80s remember how terrible it was. I don't care what they say, it wasn't all new wave fine. Okay. Okay, Terry Gibbs presented a problem because she sings in a contralto. She sings in a lower voice than I speak in. And her name's Terry. And if you were around in the 80s, there were a lot of guys named Terry too. And so this led to a problem with a number of program directors that got rectified when MCA sent them letters about how to introduce this artist. And I can show you another example of it right now. I was working country radio at the time. I was not supposed to introduce the artist as Terry Gibbs, Miss Terry Gibbs. It always had to be Miss Terry Gibbs. They wanted it to be perfectly clear that there was a woman singing about a man who wanted to go to bed with her. Because country, country. So part of what I want to talk to you about today is the way that we look at gender in popular song and in country music, and how these things align. And part of what I need to do in order to address that is to talk about the lyric eye. And I'm true, but the way I want to do it is to show you one of the first times I was aware that of how the performative elements of, do I need to stay back here behind the mic? Okay. Part of what I wanted one of the first times I became aware of the performative element of the lyric I in popular song was when James Taylor released his album Flag in 1980. This is the only album that got me in trouble with my mother, because there was a song on it titled Brother Trucker, and she misheard the chorus when she was outside my room, I straightened things out by showing the lyric sheet right away, but there you go. I won't go any further than that, and I'm sorry for you younger people who just download music without having lyric sheets, because if you get in trouble, you're just in trouble. There's nothing to do about it. But in this case, you can see the lyric where the speaker in the song clearly identifies herself. The persona identifies herself as a woman. My grandfather was a sailor. He blew in off the water. My father was a farmer, and I, his only daughter, took up with a no-good mill-working man from Massachusetts who dies from too much whiskey and leaves me these three faces to feed. And you can see how much yearning there is in the lyric about how she spends her work day just waiting for a break, and then that fine line, me and my machine for the rest of the morning, for the rest of my life. Now James Taylor's singing that and clearly identifies the speaker as a woman early on. Now the song came from a musical version of Studs Terkel's Working, which was a collection of oral histories about blue-collar people. They made a musical out of it, and so Taylor contributed some of the songs from it. Flag is one of those albums that sometimes artists put together stuff that doesn't fit anywhere else, and they put a hit track on it, and this was James Taylor shifting from the junky, folky, happy, cheerful, junky, folky Mexico James Taylor into the James Taylor he was going to become as a VH1 staple in just a couple of years. So you know where we are on that. Okay, but this song was on here, and it got covered by a lot of people. Bette Midler covered it, and Emmylou Harris covered it as well. And if you were a country fan in the 1980s and Emmylou Harris did it, it was like being blessed. So, but here is where I'm trying to draw your attention to the notion that we should not associate the speaker or with the singer. The singer is a performer. Singing is a performative act in a way that writing poetry is not, because when you read somebody's poem, it's you in the book, and you're fully aware of how you're internalizing it, or you should be aware of how you're internalizing it. Some of you are sub-vocalizing it, and it may be that you place an emphasis in some of the passages that the author has not intended. Okay, and it's this performative factor that I want to address when we look at the notion of the lyric I. And I'm going to be shifting between PowerPoint and YouTube, so that's why I'm doing these kind of funny things. Now this is a long-winded quote, and I'm going to read it, but I'm going to walk you back through it, and it'll be fine. Trust me, I do this every day. Okay, all right. The lyric I is the specter and the muse of contemporary American poetry. Will you encounter that self or voice, the I of a lyric poem? You may assume it is the author or somehow related or associated with the author, though you may discover complications in that voice when reading the poem. Every poem's I, every moment of subjectivity in a poem is different and depends on readers who project assumptions and judgments of many kinds onto that I for whatever they or their milieus assume. The poem is autobiographical only in myth. And I'm saying this with poets in the room. And you all know some, they may be secret poets, but you know them, and in my situation, I read their books, I recognize stories that they have told me, the anecdotal things, and I'm guilty of it, in my modest production. But I'm also aware that this is a refined version of a memory that's modified to present a particular point. And the way I tend to think of it is that you can't let the facts get in the way of the truth, because the poem presents an opportunity to come up with a resonant idea of how things are. And so if in my case I put the uncle on my dad's side of the family instead of my mom's side of the family where he belongs, but that helps me to make the point, I'm going to do it. And sure, there are going to be autobiographical elements in a person's work. Where else are they going to get the experience? But we can't just say that there's going to be a one-to-one relationship in that way. So that the lyric eye is, the concept of the lyric eye also, as you see in this quote, has to do with how much we project onto that voice. You know, we're not having an unrefined experience with the speaker of the eye in the poem. We're invested in our own experience, you know, what material we might have read before, what analogous situations we may have seen in other circumstances to help us understand what's going on in the piece there. And quite frank, and I know it's counterintuitive, but those of us who teach writing run across this all the time, that the more specific the expression of an experience happens to be, the more people will feel a kindred experience to it. It has greater emotional resonance. You know, it's hard to get all mushy over a Hallmark card, but if okay, yeah, yes, thank you. I thank you. Snort of derision. That's all right. That's a plus. Or okay, but when one of our colleagues at Appalachian State just recently wrote a piece on Facebook about losing her dog. And there were just specific points in it all over the place, you know, about aggravating things the dog would do, you know, and it was basically, I love this dog, and all of this stuff was just stuff that I tolerated because I love this dog so much. It was much sweeter than some obituaries I've read for people, and you know, I don't know that I would necessarily want to have lived with that animal, but I could see why she loved that animal, and that meant a lot. So part of what we have to understand is that when we're reading the poem, a lot of what we're doing is we're projecting elements of ourselves into it. Now, music is performance in any number of ways, and if you don't think that there's body behind it, you haven't walked through Mathis Hall, because sometimes it smells like a gym in there. These are just a lot of heavy breath and you know, just the stress of the embouchure and your hands falling off from all this over and over. One of my sons is a percussionist. I fear that he'll get premature arthritis at any time. It's a bit much. You know, the marimba, you know, having the mallets every place they can be. He could move 6 at once. It was driving me crazy. Drummers are fantastic. They can just disengage everything. All right. So when we're listening to the singer, it's easier for us to assume that the singer is the same person as in the song. It's almost like when a talented actor's on stage and so embodies the character that we stop seeing the actor and start seeing the character instead. You know, so that's kind of the element that we're looking at here. And so that's all highfalutin and everything like that. So let's go to the source. Emily Dickinson wrote to her friend, "When I state myself as the representative of the verse, it does not mean me, but a supposed person." So there's your clean, refined, distilled version of what we have before. And that's how I encourage you to think as we go into this material. So here are some terms. Am I going too fast? All right, here are some terms. Unfortunately, I have Michael Cody here, so if I've gotten it wrong, he'll straighten me out. Okay, the lyricist is the person or people who write the words to the songs. We're okay there. Okay, so most closely analogous to the poet. The composer is the person or people who write the lead melodies to the song. And I'm wanting to emphasize the lead melody because that's a different job than the arranger of a piece. You know, so the lead melody would be what you would sing along to, and then the arranger would decide how the other instruments would emphasize create the foundation for the song that's going on there. Now, and so I'm reserving the term songwriter for the people who write both the melodies and the lyrics, although I will tend to lean towards the lyrics a great deal more. A demo is a recorded version of the song in preparation for a commercial release. Now, sometimes artists will record themselves in the studio as they're preparing their own tracks before releasing them, but sometimes professional songwriters who don't ordinarily record commercially will make demos so that they can send recordings to different studios and hope to hook up with an agent or an agency or somebody to assign the song to someone. A cover is when somebody records or performs the song after that song's been commercially released by somebody else. Probably the two most famous examples of covers that you would be aware of would be when Luke Combs recorded Fast Car and Tracy Chapman's Fast Car a couple of years ago. And of course there's the famous example of Johnny Cash covering Hurt and just basically taking that song away from Trent Reznor. I mean, Trent Reznor has said that it felt as if that song had been taken from him and given to somebody else because Cash's performance is so iconic, I guess, at this point. Isn't that funny to say something's iconic after, 20 years? Pretty close? Oh, my sense of time is off. Okay. A royalty is the payment made for the creators of a song, and that's going to be important when I talk about Cindy Walker in a minute. But the main thing is that the real money in music is to be the songwriter and control the rights. There's some money to be made in recording it, but not nearly as much unless you sell just loads and loads. Right? A song lives forever. That's part of the reason why the Carter family became so famous, is because AP was going around and finding different songs in the region and then writing an arrangement of those songs and then selling those arrangements and earning royalties from the arrangements. And some people were terrifically pleased that he was doing that and would send him songs so that he could transcribe arrangements and sell them. So that's part of the birth of the commercial side, not from this region anyway. And gender neutralization. Now, I've got some issues with this one, but gender neutralization is a term that's used when they change the lyrics of a song to adapt it. I'm going to read it the way I wrote it, to traditionally accepted gender roles. Okay, now this is not really gender neutralization, this is gender reassignment. And I want to show you a couple of examples of it. This is the song Next in Line. Whoa, okay. This is, and the authors are Wayne Kemp and Curtis Wayne. So we're not dealing with a singer-songwriter here. We're dealing with a songwriting team, and then they sold it to Conway Twitty. And I want you to notice that the lyrics are basically the same, except the pronouns are changed, right? So see her there at the table, see him there at the table. Okay, now what I'm doing here is transcribing the Conway Twitty version from 1968 and the Patty Loveless version from 2008 for two reasons. One of them is that I love Patty Loveless, who's a terrifically fine vocalist from Kentucky, and she released an album called Sleepless Nights in 2008, which was a collection of 50s and 60s honky-tonk songs. And she also covered some Graham Parsons in there too. So if you ever get a chance, oh man, I love that album so much. But I'm offering this one because I'm going to show you another example. Now this one just kind of stinks, because first of all, there's a swapping of just the mere swapping of the pronouns. But the other, look at the last two lines. Everybody knows I love her, but her mind is on another. Okay, so love her, another, you've got a rhyme there. But look what Patty Loveless does. Everybody knows I love him, but his mind is on another. Okay, so just, yeah, you lose the rhyme and everything. And for those of us who are familiar with the original song, there's something dissonant and hearing that the rhyme doesn't work. You know, we want something to happen there. So thankfully, and I don't know who's responsible for this, when she covers the song Why Baby Why by Daryl Edwards and George Jones on the same album, she fixes it. Somebody fixes it. I want you to look at what happens here. I'm going honky-tonk and getting tight as I can, and maybe by then you'll appreciate a good man. Okay, now I've always been kind of confused about this song because I don't know why you'd appreciate a man who gets as drunk as he can possibly get, but unless you admire capacity or something like that. But that's what's in the song. Now look how somebody, and I don't know who did it, but somebody fixed it for Patty Loveless. I'm going honky-tonk and getting tight as a string, and maybe by then you'll appreciate a good thing. Okay, now why do I like that so much? First of all, it preserves a rhyme, which I kind of want, but the thing I like most is that she's making a music illusion. You know, you want your strings tight and tuned, and so anybody can sing those lines. You know, anybody. It doesn't matter what your gender is. And that to me is true gender neutralization. You fix it so that anybody can sing it. So that's just, you know, props to Patty Loveless, you know, and her crew. Okay, now does anybody have a question? I seem to be talking fast. I must be excited. Yes.
Well, I mean, they clearly, I mean, it's a better line now.
Yeah.
When I can't remember the legalities of, you know, they change a few lines here and there, but if somebody records her version of it now, does she get a cut?
No. Because the songwriting business, and I'm getting to that in the next business about Cindy Walker, is significant because one of her most influential songs is You Don't Know Me. And there's a story behind it. Cindy Walker, there are some things here. Her career is remarkable. From the 40s to the end of the 20th century, she had songs that were at the top of the charts. Now, sometimes it was because people went back and recorded classic songs, but they were terrifically strong in that way. So I'm just going to throw these things here. She sold Lone Star Trail to Bing Crosby in 1940. Okay, that would be like a 22-year-old selling a song to Taylor Swift now. You know, that's how huge Bing Crosby was in the music industry. Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, who are Texas swing people, covered 50 of her songs. And there are even videos, you can find videos of Cindy Walker performing with Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. And she fits right in. She was a tall, lanky woman, you know, just statuesque and everything. Contralto voice. I'm going to play a recording of her in just a minute and everything like that. And she was just playing along with just one of the guys, the way she fits in. And so it's kind of funny because sometimes the songs are just ridiculous rhyming things because they just need dance music. And she goes into it with full spirit. She recorded one hit song, When My Blue Moon Turns to Gold Again, and she released one album of her own songs, Words and Music by Cindy Walker. And you can see the last song on the label there is the song You Don't Know Me, and it's credited to Cindy Walker and to Eddie Arnold. Now, the reason this matters is because, as I told you before, the money comes from writing the song. And what happened, and this is a condensed version of the story that's been told in many ways, is that Eddie Arnold encounters Cindy Walker and tells her, I've got an idea for a song. A man's in love with a woman and she doesn't realize it, and so the idea is that you don't know me. And that's it. You know, he doesn't contribute anything else to the song. She says, well, I'll see what I can do about it. And according to her account, the song started coming to her when she had gotten back to her hotel room. Because part of what Cindy Walker and her mother would do, Walker would write a number of songs, and then they'd rent a hotel suite in Nashville and let the various producers know that they were there. And Walker's mother would play piano while Walker was singing the songs to a suite full of music producers, and they'd kind of harvest what they could get from that. And Jim Reeves recorded her songs, Roy Orbison, big names for the time over and over. Willie Nelson recorded an entire album of her songs, and fortunately it got released about 3 weeks before she died, so she got to hear Willie's treatment of these classic songs as well. So you've got to be excited about that. Okay, I've got to be excited about that. So I don't know how well the print of these lyrics is showing up for you, but it's basically, you give your hand to me and then you say hello. I can hardly speak, my heart is beating so. And anyone can tell you think you know me well, but you don't know me. Like that. Okay, now are these terrifically deep songs? No, not necessarily. They're commercial, and she tended to write songs that you could learn really quickly and sing along with them, and that there's a mastery to that. But there's a curious thing that happens in her performance of it, because as you can see in the last stanza, you give your hand to me and then you say goodbye. I watch you walk away. And Eddie Arnold would sing beside that lucky guy. But Cindy Walker sings with teardrops in my eyes, which I'm kind of not too good for me, but you'll never, never know the one who loves you so you don't know me. Now, why am I curious about this? Because Cindy Walker had such an impact on commercial country music for so many decades, she was defining masculinity for those many decades. And because country music, just the way it is now, is completely dominated by male vocalists. If you listen to the top 10, it's rare that even one woman will crack the top 10 on a weekly basis. So what she's doing is writing love songs from supposedly a man's perspective, because we hear a man singing it, and so we're thinking, okay, this is a man. She was writing cowboy songs for Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys in the 40s, in the 30s and 40s. There weren't cowboys the way there were cowboys then. And she was writing drinking songs when she didn't drink that much. I mean, so the idea that, and she wrote love songs. She was married for a weekend. It didn't work out. It got annulled pretty quickly, and the marriage lasted so briefly that many of her biographies even claim that she had never been married. But she said in interviews near the end of her life that wasn't so. So I'm in this curious situation where I'm looking at somebody who doesn't fit the mold of the ideas of masculinity that she's describing, is writing about it. And that's part of the reason why I started taking courses in women's studies, because I wanted the language to be able to categorize and work things out and see how things were going. And so this leads me to wonder, when I look at the lyric, if there's anything that specifically identifies the gender of the person speaking to the beloved. You give your hand to me and then you say hello. I can hardly speak, my heart is beating so. And anyone can tell you think you know me well, but you don't know me. Any indicators there? What? Which?
Give your hand to this and that, this gender, the women mix your hand.
It could be shaking hands too. You don't know the one who thinks of you at night, who longs to kiss your lips and yearns to squeeze you tight. No, I'm just a friend, that's all I've ever been, you don't know me. And then we get the comment about the art of making love, empty. All right, so when Cindy Walker performs this song, which she finally did in the 60s, let's see. Here's how she performs it. I'm surprised she didn't record more songs than she did. Did you hear the way? Did you hear the way she sang at one? How she moved to a different note in it? Just the slightest touch of a yodel in there. Maybe I should back it up a little bit. Even that. Okay, too much. Mary Gaucher from Louisiana decided just to sing it the way it's written. Kind of complicates things here. All right, what are we supposed to assume about the persona of singing the song? And we're assuming it because a female's singing the song, but it invites us to wonder just how much the beloved doesn't know about the person who's, oh, okay. It opens more and more possibilities that way. So there's something kind of courageous or different or expanding about listening to somebody who keeps the lyric the way it is, regardless. Or it's just another way of performing. All right, we don't know Cindy Walker, but we know Amythyst Kiah. Oh boy, do we. All right. Graduate of the ETSU Bluegrass program. All right. Probably most of the people in here have seen her perform. Okay. And at the Willow Tree, of course, we missed the Willow Tree. Okay, during the publicity tour for Wary and Strange, she talked a lot about her past. And she spoke a lot about how working out the lyrics for Wary and Strange were a way for her to work out issues of her past as well. And then, of course, she got this song, Like Myself, got the Grammy nomination for Best American Roots Song, as she was part of the Songs of Our Native Daughters. So I think, aside from Kenny Chesney, she's one of the more successful graduates of that program. I know these lyrics are terrifically small, but let's enjoy part of it anyway. When you look at the lyrics, if you could actually see them, hold it. That's a little better. There's some things that the persona introduces about themselves early on. If I were to take these lyrics and put it in front of one of my classes, I'd say, what do we know about the speaker in this work? Okay, just from what we see here. Okay, and the obvious thing is the speaker identifies as Black. Kind of get that from the title, and it gets repeated over and over, so we're good there. What else do you see? Sweep that gal. Okay, now I want you to notice as you work your way through the lyrics, the speaker in the poem doesn't gender identify anywhere. Now we see some other things. The speaker expresses some strong cynicism about traditional faith. Especially the line about the lamb. You notice that, and that line, "Your precious God isn't going to save me." All right, so we see that. We notice that there's a history of enslavement that's embodied in the course of it, and then we see some markings that we would probably identify with more Americana and old time music, and going around barefoot, carrying the banjo around, that jumping the fence, that kind of stuff, which also suggests a rogue animal, when some of your stock gets out, that kind of stuff as well. So we get more of a old-timey quality in the lyric than we might expect from something that was written only about 6 years ago, that kind of stuff. But when we see Amythyst perform it, we see Amythyst because we know Amythyst. I think what some of us do is start taking autobiographical elements and going, that's what the song is about. When if a black man had performed this song, you wouldn't be as quick to do that. It would sound like something from the past somewhere. So that's one of the things that we kind of encounter when we know somebody or we think we know somebody who has made something. Wild Turkey, which is another song from the album, is Amythyst Kiah has talked about in interviews how this is a song of how she dealt with her mother's death and how it led to suicidal ideation on her part. And you can see that there are some specifics in the lyric about being a young person and feeling like a machine from having emotion just wiped out of you. And a compassionate line about hoping that the mother the lost woman who's lost due to a drinking and driving accident found some kind of comfort in the last moments. But we want to be careful if somebody else were to cover this song, or we want to be careful not to try to go for a experience to line delineation, because that's a limitation of the creation in that way. And you'll also notice this, "Oh Lord, will I ever feel right again?" What happens when we look at a number of pieces that employ a lyric eye that seem to be the same entity in a collection like an album, or in a collection like a volume of poetry? How careful should we be not to assume that it's the same eye from place to place? That's a rhetorical question that I'm still kind of wrestling with myself. So this is the wrap up. How should we listen? Well, first of all, I'm thinking that maybe some of you will start listening to a couple of your favorite songs and go, who is this? Or I thought I was sure before, or am I projecting on it? So it's a little bit of homework, but I'm not going to take it up. You do what you need to do. The other thing is just bear in mind that the writer and the persona are not the same entities. Even autobiographies, which are intended to be just, and I mean just as in fair representation of a person's life, have an artificial structure put on them. You've got rising action, intention, and some kind of resolution. And then what are we supposed to get from that? Why should you read Ben Franklin's autobiography? Well, he'll tell you. And then he'll congratulate you at the end. And here's what you should have learned, that kind of stuff. I want to do this more. Respect that the performers who refuse gender neutralizing expect listeners, first to value the strength of the original lyric. Luke Combs, of course, was dealing with politics of followers who where it's risky for him to sing that song and keep the checkout girl line in there. So, but he respects Tracy Chapman enough to keep it, and she's definitely benefited from that as well. It drew her. She won Song of the Year for a song that was, how old was that? at least 30 years old. That's an impressive accomplishment. Also, consider a broader alternative to the song's interpretation, because when Natalie Maines of the Chicks sings Long Time Gone, and she's singing about not meaning Delia any harm, we sort of wonder what kind of harm, when we hear a woman's voice singing it, what kind of harm might she be talking about that would be different if we assume it's a man who's saying that. So, and then the last thing is that, and I've got to be careful about it too always, that I've got to be careful about how much of myself I'm projecting onto the persona in the song. I don't want to get in the way of the interpretation. I do it when I'm studying poetry. I should do it when I'm listening to the songs too. So now your favorite slide. Thank you. Questions, comments?
Alan, can you elaborate on that very last point you made about projecting yourself onto the song?
Yeah, I can, and this is a notorious example, and it's an old one, but you'll have to forgive me. You remember the song Luca? Suzanne Vega's Luca? There were people who thought that was a pleasant little song about a little boy who thought that life was sunny and everything. And when you pay attention to it, there's obviously some kind of abuse or mistreatment that the child endures, and we've got to be careful when the melody seems to be sprightly and delicate and everything to not make these kinds of assumptions. We've all heard of anecdotes where people have played Every Breath You Take at their weddings because they thought that it was a terrifically romantic song. Yeah, if you're getting married in 1984 and intend to be under camera for the rest of your life, but otherwise, those are extreme examples, but sometimes people will make pretty serious errors in thinking what a song's about, because it's more of what they want it to be than what it is.
Yeah, people think Tennessee Waltz is a happy love song.
Yeah, I mean, you lose your loved one because your buddy steals your love. Yeah, it's just, and it always throws me off about how so many traditional minded people, because country is a music for, honky tonk is wonderful. I mean, I love it, but it's always about cheating and drinking, and it's just kind of funny to hear how they brag about it. For me, it's honky tonk and tight as a string stuff. Is that an answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else?
I have a question.
Sure.
So a lot of focus on separating the performer from the actual songwriter, the artist who wrote the song, and their intentions. And I wonder what your opinion was on when an artist makes a song or an album that has a concept to it, has a theme and a character behind it.
Yes.
It's not just them, and the performer them, but them, the performer, and then the performance of that character on top of it.
I think what we need to do is watch the performer, because depending on the production, it could be that the writer has produced the album and has hired a singer to come in and take care of it. I'm going to show you a generational shift, and I apologize for it. But I'm assuming the majority of the people in this class lecture audience are familiar with Meatloaf's Bad Out of Hell album. Okay, Meatloaf didn't write any of that stuff. It was Jim Steinman. Okay, but so Meatloaf is an instrument in Steinman's arrangement of the production of these songs. So what we have there is Meatloaf being more like an actor in a musical, but it's being staged in front of a band instead of conventional sets and things like that. Randy Newman's Faust works that way too. Yes.
So
not that I don't love meatloaf, but I was just gonna say, like, I'm thinking of like Taylor Swift, who's dropping a new album on Friday, right?
Yes.
I'm going to the movie, it's a whole thing. But, you know, she's kind of in a way performing the persona of a showgirl, even though she is a performer. She's got Sabrina Carpenter guesting on the album. It's a whole thing about what it means to be a showgirl, but it's also not really probably all autobiographical, right? But of course, Taylor famously like pours all of her breakups and her relationships and her love of Trav and all this stuff into her lyrics. So people are going to mine those things for every detail about her life, but I think one thing that you're teaching us to do is like be aware that there's always like a divide there. As fun as it is to get lost in that kind of thing, it's still a persona, right, that she's wearing in a way. I'm not saying it's not authentic. I'm just saying,
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not authentic either, but it's a version.
yeah,
Just as my presentation here is a version of me.
contain multitudes.
I was teaching Whitman earlier today. I hope so. So, yes.
A lot of this reminds me, of course, I'm on cartoon, but David
Two,
in addition to Wales.
okay.
David Bowie presenting himself as Ziggy Stardust. That was
A deliberate,
character, you know, that he was.
and then the thin white Duke later.
Yeah.
And
He was a master of doing stuff.
I mean, we saw people build their entire careers behind Alice Cooper as a gentle person, you know that, and apparently Ozzy said he thought it was a toy bat. He didn't think it was a real. But when you're about to go, you can revise your history however you want to. Yes.
I'm curious, I'm assuming you listen to Cowboy Carter? Question mark?
Yes.
Okay. I'm curious about the usage of the word I in the Cowboy Carter album according to your perspective.
It's still a creation, and Beyonce said that a lot of that was from her mother's experience instead of her own, but she was incorporating those different things. So, but we've got this issue when we study literature to say that the author's dead. You know, once it's out there, I mean, when you're performing something over and over, you're performing a new version of it every time, you know, unless you're lip syncing. But even that new performance is your interpretation of something that you had made before. And you see this when authors are reading their work frequently, that they may put a particular turn in a phrase that they hadn't done before. If you watch people more than once, it's the I in Cowboy Carter is a distinct entity that's developing over the course of the material. Okay. Yes.
I'm writing a paper right now on Barthes and the death of the author. And so do you agree that the author is dead when you consume a work, or?
I don't think that the author necessarily has the best definitive interpretation of the work once it's out there. Because there could be some issues that the author didn't necessarily want to confront in writing it, and we also have to realize that the author's not the same person from the point of publishing that piece. It may be that they go back and they look at it and they recognize that there's something that they might have addressed that they didn't realize they had addressed. I was in a workshop with somebody who described a traffic jam like a battle. And her interpretation of it was that the Lord was guiding her through it, but the way she was describing it was that there were all these demonic forces that were attacking her. And she wasn't exactly happy with me when I showed her the specific passages. That didn't mean that my reading was the best one. It just meant that, I was seeing something that she wasn't seeing. And so, okay. Did I pass the audition? Okay, all right. Thank you all.